To Sean Jacobs. He's a scholar of South Africa. And Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show. You know, this evening, President Obama said he no longer belongs to us. He belongs to the ages. And of course, the last time we heard those kind of words uttered here in Washington, D.C. was in 1865 when Andrew Stanton said when Abraham Lincoln died, he belongs to the ages. So we know what Lincoln represents for African Americans here in the United States, but across the globe, what does Nelson Mandela represent for African Americans, would you say?
I think, firstly, I think personally for me as a South African who sort of straddles the generation from the end of apartheid to freedom, I was a college student when he was released from prison in 1990, and I'm very much a product of that freedom, you know, in terms of the benefits that comes with what might be a very incomplete freedom, but yes, you know, it's a democratic freedom. I think secondly, I think for South Africans, he represents the sort of embodiment of the struggle against racism there, and to create a different kind of society that's more humane, free from inequality, and more equal, you know, in other words, more equal, filled more with rights. I think globally, Mandela is probably the equal of Gandhi and Martin Luther King as people who dominated politics, sort of ethical politics, in the 20th century. In the United States, I think he's not just a leader for black people, but I think specifically black people took inspiration from him after the end of the civil rights movement at the end of the 1960s, and when that struggle took on a sort of more global tone. In fact, anybody who remembers this will remember when the ANC took made Mandela sort of the icon of their struggle by the late 1970s into the early 1980s. It was African Americans in the United States that spearheaded these campaigns around sanctions, you know, the beginnings of recognizing the ANC as a representative of the South African people, Jesse Jackson, as I saw in some of the images, you had Martin Luther King's wife, etc. So yes, in a way, Mandela is not just a South African leader, but he's definitely a leader for, I think, globally black people. But I think more than that, he's just one of those human beings of the 20th century who kind of embodied something more about what we are as humans.
And Sean, you know, former President de Klerk said today that he was a very human man. Anna Naidu telling the story about how disarming he was when he met him. There was something very down to earth about this man as well.
I mean, I remember I once had the opportunity actually to meet Mandela. It was at in a hotel foyer. He had come to meet the mother of Hein Groskopf, who had been murdered in Namibia by a death squad, a South African death squad. And I was in an elevator and I was stuck for a minute with Mr. Mandela. It did not feel that I was talking to somebody who at that point already was, you know, kind of a global leader and who people admired. He was very kind, you know, he had a couple of words for me. I met him again on another instance at a school in Cape Town. And yes, he's very disarming, very down to earth, very normal human being. I think that's very different from the way people think about political leaders now.
What will be the lasting thought that you'll have of Nelson Mandela?
I think personally, as a South African, I think he represented that, you know, sense of struggling, of having a kind of ethical politics. And I think in South Africa right now, people are sort of shuffling around because politics in South Africa have become ordinary. There's been a lot of disappointment around the leadership of the ANC, the leadership of the country, in dealing with these intractable, what people might have seen, intractable problems around inequality, around poverty. And I think that spirit of Nelson Mandela, I think it's present in South Africa right now with young people struggling around education, people struggling around housing. People take inspiration from Mandela and from that struggle.
Sean Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us from New York this evening. Certainly appreciate it.